In many pre-colonial African societies, paradigms of constructive dialogue across community strata formed integral parts of the polity. Regardless of the governance structure of these societies, the individual voices of community members held sway in the decision-making processes. For societies like this, such as the Igbo of southeast Nigeria, decisions around community welfare would be deliberated upon by the collective. But this presentation is not about history. It is about education. Specifically, it is about improving systems of education in Nigeria. This is the work that the Research on Improving Systems of Education, RISE project, does. RISE is currently working in several developing countries around the world to determine ways of overcoming the learning crisis to achieve quality education. In Nigeria, RISE aims to understand how demand-side issues, such as community engagement, parental aspirations, and student motivation, as well as local politics, affect education outcomes on a community level. The Nigeria arm of RISE is a collaboration between the African School of Economics and the Center for the Study of the Economies of Africa. An important aspect of the Nigeria project is the political economy component, where RISE researchers study how politics interacts with education demand to shape education policy. The idea is to, in novel experiments, convene local stakeholders and policymakers to the same conversation table so that they may mutually commit to improving governance and education outcomes. The thinking is that if these models of engagement will work anywhere, it would be in African societies such as Nigerian ones, which carry these methods of civil interaction in their historical DNA. The first state in the experiment was Enugu. Here, 3 local government areas were chosen for the study, and another 3 were used as the control. The 3 components of this exercise were to 1. Gather evidence-based information around it through research. 2. Hold constructive deliberations between policymakers and local stakeholders with a view to reaching common ground regarding steps to improve education. And 3. The signing of a social contract that would be emblematic of the government's commitments to achieving the common goals. Let me take you now on the journey to Enugu State that the researchers made. We were hopeful for a cultural disposition at the very least at this point of commencement of our experiment. Thankfully, we were very well received by the government and the people. In order to locate and assess the areas of need, we often travel to very remote locations. The journeys there were arduous, to say the least. So much so that we would sometimes lose our way, or if we were lucky, get the chance to stop and see the sights. Nevertheless, we always got to our destinations. At the locations of the study, the research evaluated the priorities of identified stakeholders around designated areas of concern. The most influential stakeholders were identified through a power mapping process, and questionnaires were administered to them to identify their priorities, using selected schools as focal points. Some of these stakeholders were religious leaders and community leaders. Many of the community chieftains received us very warmly. and some of them even took us to the local schools to show us the problems themselves. We traversed the communities for data and sometimes even visited community members at their homes, where we discussed with them at length about their experiences and expectations. And sometimes we would stay for a delicious lunch. Using set-out criteria as guidelines, we assessed and recorded the physical conditions of the schools. Questionnaires were also administered to parents and teachers at these schools to gain more insights for the research. We spoke with the head teachers at these schools to understand the problems they were facing in depth.
The block has blown down. The children are staying at the mango tree. The environment is not conducive for them to learn.
You can see the classroom now. 2 classes being in a 1 classroom, too compacted.
Even bad boys coming here, they sleep at night with the girls. Even we used to see pants and condoms inside the school because it's not protected. It's not a full wall.
The number one problem is shortage of teachers. In my school, I have a population of about 305 pupils being managed by only 5 teachers.
For the researchers themselves, the exercise threw up new learnings and concerns.
Okay, over time here, it's been quite an eye-opening experience. But for me, what really stood out and what was really challenging is that all through the various schools, we've been through about 9 schools already, and we've not been able to see one proper toilet facility. And it's quite challenging, especially for the girls.
We spoke to all the education secretaries in the study local government areas to hear the government side to the conversation. Mrs. Ejike Asadu is the education secretary in Nsukka Central.
The state of education so far is that the state government is really trying to make sure that there's adequate provisions here and there to make the system work. But the truth is that a lot of things needed to be done.
Finally, the qualifications of the teachers were reviewed and the students were assessed with standardized tests. The data gathered around the schools would now inform summit discussions. The Nkanu West Summit held on the 9th of December 2020 and was moderated by the wonderful Kobi Igbo. The venue was Abani. The deliberations were preceded by introductions, first of the host and the organizers, and then of the education stakeholders present. Dr. Kingsley Tochukwu Ude, Special Advisor to the hosting Enugu State Government on Education, represented the Executive Governor on the day and gave his opening remarks.
It's a research project, and we in the government of Enugu State understand the importance of research so that we make decisions based on data, on facts, research, facts, and data. And that is why immediately this project came and spoke to us about the possibility for collaboration. We welcomed them with our 2 hands. And we have done our bit to see to the success of what we have today, this summit. And of course, we know that this summit would produce for us part of what we would integrate to the blueprint for the improvement of education in the Enugu State.
Lady Anne Adeze Onyepona, the Senior Special Assistant to the Enugu State Government on Education, also represented the government at the summit. Dr. Chukwuka Onyekwena, the Executive Director of the Center for the Study of the Economies of Africa, which institution organized the event, introduced the summit and the work leading up to it.
Why I call this a constructive dialogue is that the dialogue emanates from a research exercise, an evaluation exercise that was undertaken at the community level in Nsukka, in Nkano West.
The RISE country team lead, Professor Leonard Wanchekon, also participated virtually from Princeton University.
And then whatever outcome we reach is not just something coming from the governor, it's not something that comes from the different stakeholders, it's something that we all take ownership of.
The data that emerged from questionnaires administered to stakeholders in Nkano West indicated that 3 issues: quality of education, financial management, and access to education stood out as most urgent in this local government area. The sub-issues under these formed basis of the deliberations that ensued. The other research findings were presented as well to guide the discussions.
I've been a traditional ruler for 27 years. And my experience is that there's practically no maintenance.
There are some ongoing projects in so many schools today. How many of them are thoroughly supervised?
Now, private schools are springing up everywhere. Most of them are not better than the public schools. They are not. But the environment is better.
The state government representative, Lady Anne Onyekwena, gave immediate responses to certain issues raised.
If we are looking for playground, that's one thing. If we are looking for learning, we find out that we get more learning in public schools than we do in private schools.
Stakeholders present put forward observations, questions, and recommendations to the government.
After 2 weeks of roofing that zinc, the roof, everything went off, and children are sitting on the ground inside the field of the primary school. It's a garage. The students are not safe. The teachers are not safe. Who do we hold responsible for that?
You never see any projects, no good project in some of these schools, especially those schools in the interior areas. Whereas those in the urban areas, you find out that maybe on yearly basis, you find out wanting one project or the other being carried out in that particular school.
Let government come open, define free education, where it stops and where it starts.
If government is saying that we have limited resources, we understand. But the resources we are putting into education, are we doing it in a transparent manner?
For Nkano West to improve, there's need to recruit more teachers, especially those from these areas.
We have so many primary schools around us that is not being fenced.
Yes.
That doesn't have even security man to mind the gates.
Yeah.
So my suggestion is that government should go into these things, fencing all the schools.
Yes.
Participants, however, also acknowledged that responsibility fell on them as well.
Government cannot do everything for us. Secondary school alone in Enugu is over 400 secondary school. I don't even know the number of primary schools. So let us give government helping hands.
It's not the government that will handle the attitude change of a child. It is our parents.
Yeah. Every parent should first of all take responsibility.
Okay.
Government will do theirs, but we must start from home.
But not without some healthy debate.
I agree with the fact that the government may not be able to do it alone. But we have not even set up a platform in which people can even come and contribute.
Nobody will give you his money to manage if the person has not seen you manage your own money well.
Okay.
If the government has not channeled that fund well in academics, personally, I will not be moved to donate my money.
It's so interesting listening to all of you. The essence of this meeting is working.
Some novel concerns were also brought forward, such as the need for gender balance in teaching personnel.
We should look into the finance of the teachers so that male teachers could also mix up with them.
I'm saying that government should employ more men in the school. More men? Because in our school, we are only female.
At the end of each deliberation, a tangible demand emerging from a consensus was articulated.
What percentage of funding do we want government to spend on education?
Let there be
a minimum of 100% increase in education budgetary allocation.
So he has said we want the Nkanu West people, education sector should have 100% allocation. Madam, you heard.
Any organization that it is going to be involved, let government pronounce it to the hearing of people. Thank you.
Okay. So in addition to the 100% recommendation increase on a budget, we want, Nkanu West people want transparency on how this money will be allocated.
At the end of the discussions, Lady Onyekwena commended the participants, accepted the outcomes, and gave assurances of passing them on to the governor.
You've done so very well today. Just know that it's a partnership between the states and the community. And whatever you will, we have a wonderful listening governor that is going to hear this, and his actions you are going to see.
On the basis of the decisions agreed upon on the day, a social contract was drawn up containing the education needs of the people of Nkanu West and signed by the stakeholders. This was presented to the government representative by Dr. Chukwuka Onyekwena. She signed the social contract as a symbolic gesture of the government's commitment to addressing the stated education needs of the people of Nkanu West. This social contract contained all the specifics of the decisions birthed from the deliberations, such as the requirement for the government to double efforts on securing and fencing schools. After the summit, Dr. Ude, the government representative, had this to say.
I would say that the state government have done a lot in the education sector. There are better educational outcomes now, but there's still room for improvement. We still have challenges. We still have problems in our hands. And we are open to recommendation. We're open to partnership. We're open to collaboration. We're open to evidence-based policymaking, evidence-based decision-making, because that is one of the things that this project affords us. We have evidence with which to make decisions, to make policies, and to also take action. That is why we're here. That is why we supported the RISE project from the beginning. And everyone is speaking freely. There's no politics and politicking here.
Other participants, such as Dr. Adeze Onyekwena, weighed in as well.
The important thing is that we have started a process. As you are going, you begin to fine-tune it, putting your eyes on the goal.
We're going to be I make with the meeting now. But on our Bemechaya, I had another result. But I believe I got no result.
We have been dialoguing. We have been trying to create this kind of opportunity, but I think this is a very unique one in terms of sincerity. I could see sincerity from the government representatives. I could also see openness from both the workers. I could also see openness from the community representatives.
At an official dissemination ceremony for the Political Economy of Education Reform Project in Enugu State, the RISE Nigeria team engaged with the state government to ascertain whether progress has been made towards their commitments embodied in the social contracts. Representatives of the state government in education, which group included the Commissioner for Education, Professor Uche Eze, Dr. Kingsley Ude, and the Secretary of the State's Universal Basic Education Board, Dr. Hyginus Eze, reaffirmed the state's commitments and affirmed that the RISE PE project has already begun to constructively inform education intervention by the government.
In today's world, you cannot make policies when you don't have the data. And the state government understands the importance of data in policy formulation and implementation. Our partnership was informed by our desire to have real-time data, valid, credible data, which will help us in decision making. And I also believe that your own intervention will add value to our education system, and through collaborative efforts, we will take education to the next level in Enugu State.
Hopefully, communities will participate more to shaping education outcomes in their localities towards the ideal.